So my story, I think it always starts with the tragedy journey per se. Yeah. So I think the Cliff Notes version on this story, because this went on for years, is I remember going into my mom's room. And I just had severe stomach pain. And I also was breaking out, and I had acne, and I felt like I was a little bit overweight. I wasn't, but like I was working out a whole lot, and I thought that I should be thinner. And that was a deal when Kate Moss was around. That was kind of when I was young, and she was like 90 pounds and had a little bit of a habit per se. So anyway, it was just an unachievable goal. And the long story short of it was my mom took me to the primary care at the time. And she said, nothing's wrong with you. Everything checks out. Here's some topical cream because my neighbor next door sells it. Oh, and if that doesn't work, here you can have some birth control for your very heavy periods and your acne. And then we can put you on Accutane. And I was just like, forget it, Yeah. So that was kind of the first part where I felt like I wasn't heard. I felt everything was normal and it was just something I had to live with. And that is a terrible feeling to just be like, well, I'm going to have acne forever. My hormones are going to keep me debilitated in bed, and I'm going to be bloated and whatever it is. So fast forward a couple of years, and I walked into my mom's room with debilitating stomach pain from what I thought was period cramps. And she said, something's not right. And so she rushed me to another doc, and he sent me to the ER. And it turned out my appendix was currently exploding. It was in the process of exploding, and I mistook that for period cramps. That's how severe it was. Wow. I was about to go into sepsis. Oh, so that's terrifying when, you think that pain is normal. And so then you when I was in the hospital, they're telling me how happy I am or how healthy I am, and organs and appendages are coming out of me. Like, great. Okay. It just doesn't. And as a kid, I think at about 18, I knew I wasn't healthy. I knew something was wrong. Yeah. Then I fast forward another couple years, and I start breaking out into hives. And I kept on going to the emergency room, and apparently I was Benadryl deficient because it was rinse, repeat, Benadryl, IV Benadryl, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. And nobody talked to me about anything until it got so severe that the hives were swelling up into my throat, which actually can constrict your breathing and can kill you. And so anyway, I was like, I'm done with this. I'm done with being told I'm healthy. I'm done with Benadryl deficiencies. And so I pursued holistic medicine at that time. And folks talked to me about my diet. They cleared up gut infections. I mean, the list goes sort of on. And my ideal situation was to become a CEO of a corporation. Some big, you have these big fancy dreams. And so I walked into corporation my first day and was like, no, no, this is terrible. Like, I don't know. And then I transitioned into chiropractic. And primarily the reason for doing that was because it had the broadest scope of practice without going to be an MD, because I didn't want the pressure from insurance. And now we're seeing folks be able to do that a little bit different. But at the time, we couldn't do that. And so I was pretty passionate because chiropractic changed my life dramatically too, just getting adjusted. And I think that it really brought me full physical health because I was an athlete. And so I just really wanted to combine those two things of the functional medicine, the lab tests, and the chiropractic. And so that's where I am today.
Wow. Like very inclusive, because I love how you talk about how chiropractic is kind of, it has that broader baseline. So you can go into that. And really a lot of the chiropractors that I know, because I've go to chiropractors. And it seems like they start into that, but then they do, I'll call it like kind of specialized, that they kind of branch off into a section where they're doing chiropractic, but they're doing all these other things, because chiropractic, and correct me if I'm wrong, has an outlook or a consciousness that's more of like the whole body and not just one piece or like symptomatic, like, oh, you got a sore throat. Well, let's look at that. Like, my experience anyways has been why I'm an advocate for chiropractic health is that going into a very good chiropractor, they're just not looking at like, oh, you got lower back pain. Well, let's crack it. Let's do this. The chiropractors I've seen have gone, okay, let's take a look at the whole big picture here and what else is going on.
100%. Absolutely. Because you think about what's going to refer to that low back. You could have, for example, you could have a GI issue, for example, referring to your low back. And it's like, well, if we're just like constantly popping this, because the nerve roots are the same, I mean, we might get some relief, but why don't we dive deeper to see why this continues to come back? Because if you have an injury, if you have a sprain strain or something in your back, or you pulled something, it should resolve relatively quickly. But when things, most people are much more chronic, and that means that there's an inflammatory component that could be coming from the way you're sitting at a desk. I mean, that happens a lot. Or it also could be coming from something going on internally, which is not uncommon. And I get asked a lot, well, if I run blood work, are you going to even find anything? If I run these specialized lab tests, no one's found anything on me. Are you going to find something? I'm like, absolutely. That's why these are specialized lab tests. We will find things, that are there that could explain these symptoms,
Right.
So it's definitely all inclusive. And I think you have to look and treat the whole person versus just looking at someone's low back. You want to know why.
Right.
The question is why.
Why, and why is it not getting better, or why does it keep coming back? Because would you agree that we're not meant to, nor should we have to live with, like, I love, you said something here, pain and normal, you used it in the same sentence. I'm like, that, I love that, because it's like we've been conditioned to just accept that, as you get older, or you're an athlete, or you do that, you've had babies, like all of these things that contribute to your body's kind of gone through some stuff. So there's an expectation or an acceptance of a level of pain that, that's just normal. That's just how it is. And I totally disagree. I don't think that is how it should have to be.
I agree. I agree with you disagreeing.
Okay.
Yes, because you should not be in pain. Pain is just an alerting. Something's wrong.
It's like our internal signal, like, hello. I want to talk a little bit about gut health, because this is a big thing. I mean, there's so much about it out there. There's a lot out there that's kind of like, but there's a lot of people out there that are trying to put it in a place where it's being, it can be talked about, I think, with the seriousness and the intention that it deserves, because 72% of our immune system is in the digestive tract. So clearly it's a very important element. And when we aren't feeling well, it's, working as a holistic health practitioner, when people would walk into my office and I'd listen to their story and, what's going on and how they're feeling and what they've done and all of that, my first question was always like, so what do you eat? What are you eating? What did you eat today? What's your diet like? And I kind of get this look back, like, I just told you all of this and you asked me what I ate today. Yeah, I did. So how, from your perspective, how important is it that we really start to make our gut health a priority? Because I don't know that it is yet as much as it needs to be, but it's getting there.
Very. I think that it's huge. I deal in a lot with, for example, neurotransmitters. People come to me a lot for anxiety and depression. So neurotransmitters are made in the brain, but they're stored in the gut. Yeah. So anxiety, depression, you think about how much that contributes, and then how much that is going to lead into a cycle of craving foods that have a lot of sugar in them to feel better, to feel less anxious, less depressed. And then, that impacts your immune system. The gut impacts everything. And I personally cannot move forward on a protocol. I can't treat hormones. I can't really detoxify mold or heavy metals or any of that until I really know that the gut is working, the person is eliminating fully. Because if I go in and I do all that fancy stuff and they don't have the fundamentals in place to be able to move their bowels, digest their food, get their nutrients from their food, we've got a problem. We've got a huge problem. And so just as like a starting point to look at the gut, you think about an issue like iron deficiency anemia. Oh, I'm iron deficient. I'm so tired. I'm iron deficient. I just need some iron. Slap me an iron pill. But is there something wrong with it? Like, why are you iron deficient? What's the problem? Why aren't you absorbing the iron from your food? So what we know is that there's a bacteria in your stomach called H. pylori. And this guy can get out of control and he can cause ulcers and he can change the pH of your stomach to be more alkaline. And I know that there's a lot of things out there that's like, oh, you want an alkaline GI system. Your stomach, not alkaline. So you want that to be very acidic. And the reason why is if you go to eat at a restaurant and somebody back there was like, I'm just sick, he mishandled something, the meat sat out too long, I don't know, whatever it was. And then that arrives on your dinner plate and there's some sort of pathogen on it. Your stomach is a major line of defense to not allow that to go into your full digestive system, right? To set up shop, to set up residence there. So what we know about H. pylori, for example, is that it likes to eat your nutrients to replicate, specifically iron. And so when you see somebody, for example, that's iron deficient, they're not getting their nutrients from their food. And you really need these nutrients to run pathways so that you can actually run through and function normally. So gut, I mean, I think the long story short, the gut is so important.
Yeah. Yeah. And so do you think, and this can be like personal opinion, or, I mean, you probably have some research and science back stuff that you can add to that, but do you think, I mean, I really do think like as far as like the education, what we know now, I mean, it's like anything, every decade we know so much more. I know when we know better, we do better, or we try to do better. So I really think that we're living in an age where, again, there's a level of optimal health that people are going, wait a second, I want to live like that and I should live like that. And I think that's great. I think people are getting better at learning that they do need to be an advocate for their own health. However, I also see people, seems like we're busier than ever, busy. And because we have all of this technology right at our fingertips, we seem to we can take on more. So our days get more full. So we're busier than ever. There's a lot more stress. There's a lot more anxiety. There's a lot more pressure. How much of that do you think is an influence over our diets? Because I mean, generally, as far as even your major chain grocery stores, there's now organic sections. And I think, you've got places like Whole Foods and all of that. So it's out there. There's probably more people than ever utilizing that. But at the end of the day, I wonder how great a shift has happened. And do we still need a really big shift? Where do you think we're at in terms of our nutrition and how we're feeding our body to at least sustain some level of health that keeps us better than not so good?
I think there's a couple questions in there. So I think the biggest thing is stress, food, cravings. It's what it sounded like was one of the first questions in there. So stress and food cravings, you tend to crave more processed carbohydrates and more sugar when you're stressed. So I've got a study for you. So we'll just dive in.
Yeah. Okay. Love it.
And I was actually reading a research study last night that you will eat more sugar when you're stressed. But there was a research study that came out and it talked about rats and these poor rats. Yeah. They basically starved the rats and they incorporated a sucrose solution for one of the sets and then just regular rat chow for the other set. And so they wanted to see what the rats would do with the sucrose solution and how much their dopamine levels increase. So I'm going to take a left turn here. So the rats with the sucrose solution, their dopamine increased 130% above normal baseline. Okay. And the rats with the rat chow only their dopamine levels did not increase. And the rats with the sucrose solution, they continued to drink more and more and more and more each day. And they chose that over the rat chow all the time. Okay. So dopamine is stored in the gut. And when dopamine is our motivation focused, we're getting it done, we don't need coffee to get going type of neurotransmitter. And so number one, if you're more stressed out, dopamine runs the adrenal pathway. So it gets more depleted, so you crave more sugar. Food manufacturers know that. So I'm going to circle back to the grocery store. Right. Food manufacturers know that. In I think it was the early 90s, they did a study and there were 11,000 new foods hitting the shelves each year. Now, I don't know about you, but I have not seen that many varieties of broccoli. I don't know. I don't know. So I think what's going on, in my opinion, I think most of the folks are eating, they try to eat healthy, but people just have this craving for these processed carbohydrates, for sugars. And I think that stress is a huge piece driving that. Food manufacturers know that. So they're adding sugar into the foods so that you have a better experience. So if you have a better experience with that ketchup, wow, I felt great after I had that ketchup, because you had a dopamine dump and your serotonin levels actually went back to normal after being stressed, you're going to tend to buy that. And then you're getting into food cravings and food addictions. And what I learned early on in practice was I would put people on an elimination diet. And I'd be like, yeah, can you do this? And they're like, yeah, I'm on board. I'm excited. Boom. Come back. How was it? Oh, I just couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. And I was like, why? What happened? And I just had to have cookie, cakes, candy, processed carbohydrates, bread, blah, 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 whatever it was, that we were trying to eliminate. And it finally became clear to me that folks were just so depleted in their neurotransmitters that they were trying to help themselves by boosting that up. And so I think people really want to eat clean. I think people really want to try, but I think stress adds such a component. And I think the work-life balance that we currently have, I think is really hard for us. That's my opinion. And I think that that's really driving a lot of maybe the inappropriate food choices, alcohol, all of that. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, no, it did.
A big circle.
No, it did. It did. And I think a lot of people listening are sitting there going, okay, getting that, and probably thinking about their typical day and what that may include and what their stressors are and kind of what they reach for at the end of the day, maybe.